He never suspected I owned the ground beneath his feet. The crystal glass felt cool against my palm as I watched them from across our marble-floored living room. 5 men in tailored suits, all senior executives at Reynolds Technologies, all handpicked by me through layers of shell companies and discreet hiring firms. And there was James, my husband of 8 years, their VP of Operations, leading the chorus of mockery aimed directly at me. Remember when she tried interviewing at Reynolds? James continued, loosening his Armani tie with that smug look he'd perfected over years of unending privilege. God, I wish I could have been there to see that train wreck in person. If only he knew that the interviewee had been my quarterly inspection of middle management, carefully orchestrated through the labyrinth of holding companies I'd built to shield my identity. I'd founded Reynolds Technologies from nothing 12 years ago, long before I ever met James. The company had been my first love, my redemption after watching my father's small business crumble under the weight of corporate raiders who looked exactly like the men drinking my expensive scotch in my living room. At least she's persistent, chuckled Michael from marketing, a man whose performance reviews I'd personally signed off on through proxies. How many rejections this month, James? Have you lost count yet? James smirked, reaching for the 30-year-old scotch I'd purchased from a private collector in Scotland. My scotch. Everything in this house, the art on the walls worth millions, the imported furniture from craftsmen across Europe, even the limited edition watch on his wrist, all paid for by the company he thought had rejected me. I took another deliberate sip of water, maintaining my practiced mask of quiet humiliation. It was the same mask I'd worn when I first met James at a charity gala benefiting tech education for underprivileged children. By then, I'd already learned through pain and betrayal that success attracted parasites like corpses attract flies. 3 failed relationships with men who saw me as nothing but their ticket to luxury had taught me a caution that bordered on paranoia. So when I met James, charming, seemingly supportive James, I decided to experiment with a new approach. I presented myself as a struggling freelance consultant, driving a modest car and living in a small apartment that was actually one of my many properties. James had seemed different at first, attentive and encouraging. You'll find your place, he'd said in those early days, his hand warm on mine. Just keep trying. Everyone faces setbacks. But as soon as the wedding ring was on my finger and he moved into what he thought was the Ari house, the mask began to slip. Success changed him, or rather, it revealed who he truly was beneath the charming veneer. The supportive partner morphed into the condescending husband with frightening speed. Hey, honey, James called out now, his voice dripping with false sympathy that made my stomach turn. Maybe you should try the coffee shop down the street. I heard they're hiring baristas now. Could be right up your alley. More laughter erupted around him, 5 men united in their mockery of a woman they perceived as beneath them. I forced a weak smile, playing my role perfectly. Inside, I was methodically reviewing the documentation my private investigators had compiled over the past year, the unofficial meetings with competitors in hotel bars after hours, the inflated expense reports claiming business dinners that were actually personal indulgences, the small but steady leaks of company information that always seemed to benefit James's personal stock portfolio. Every transgression, every ethical breach, every moment of cruelty, all documented with meticulous precision. I think I'll head upstairs, I said softly, playing the part of the defeated wife with an Oscar-worthy performance. Big day tomorrow. Another interview. Don't wait up. Sweetie, James called after me, the endearment sounding like an insult on his lips. We're celebrating Peterson's promotion. Might be a late one. Peterson. My latest plant in senior management, a loyal executive I'd personally recruited years ago. Tomorrow, he would be documenting their alcohol-loosened conversations, adding to the evidence we'd been gathering for what I privately called a judgment day. In my private study, Locked away from their drunken voices and casual cruelty, I settled behind my antique mahogany desk, a family heirloom from my grandmother, a woman who taught me that patience was the deadliest weapon in any arsenal. The hidden wall panel slid open silently at my fingerprint's touch, revealing my secure workspace where I conducted my real business. 3 high-resolution monitors sprang to life, displaying Reynolds Technologies' real-time operations across the globe, from our headquarters to our offices in Tokyo, London, and Singapore. A small empire built through years of careful strategy, brilliant innovation, and ironclad NDAs. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sarah, my most trusted executive and one of the few people who knew my true identity. Final documentation in place. Board members briefed. Tomorrow's meeting confirmed. All systems go. I smiled, thinking of the carefully orchestrated revelation to come. The board had always known me as Alexandra Chin, the reclusive founder who communicated through encrypted video calls, her face always partially obscured. Tomorrow they would meet their CEO in person for the first time, not as the mysterious figure behind the screen, but as James's unemployable wife. The wife he'd mocked for years, whose business acumen he dismissed, whose advice he'd laughed at during dinner parties. My fingers traced the edge of the termination papers on my desk, not just for James, but for every member of his little drinking club. Each document backed by months of evidence, reviewed by our top legal team, ironclad and inescapable. There would be no golden parachutes, no generous severance packages, no soft landings for men who'd created a culture of toxicity and discrimination. The sound of breaking glass echoed from downstairs, followed by raucous laughter that bounced off the marble floors. Time was when such careless disrespect for my home would have angered me to the point of confrontation. Now it just added another piece to the documentation, the inappropriate use of company property for personal entertainment. I closed my eyes, letting the familiar hum of computers wash over me like a lullaby. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for me, but for every employee who'd suffered under James's leadership. But tonight, I savored the calm before the storm, remembering my father's words in the days after we lost everything. A success isn't about who has the biggest voice in the room, Alex. It's about who has the wisdom to wait, watch, and pick the perfect moment to act. The perfect moment had finally arrived after 8 years of careful planning. I heard James and his friends stumbling out to their waiting to retrieve it. The vehicle is company property, after all, I nodded, turning to the stack of documents requiring immediate attention. Organizational charts needed updating, responsibilities needed reassigning, and damage control needed to begin with our major clients who might be concerned about the sudden leadership change. One more thing, Sarah added, her tone softening slightly. The charity gala next month. The one where you met James. Cancel my RSVP, I interrupted, memories of that fateful night flashing through my mind. But double the company's donation. Anonymously. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and strategic planning. I watched through various security feeds as James's office was packed up, his personal items catalogued and shipped out. His parking space, the one he bragged about to everyone at cocktail parties, was already reassigned to Jennifer, a brilliant developer who'd been relegated to a satellite office after rejecting his inappropriate advances. By evening, as the sun set over the city skyline painting the glass towers in shades of amber and gold, Sarah brought me one final report. They are all serving their garden leave at home. Security is monitoring their communications. No unusual activities yet, but... They're in shock, I finished, recognizing the pattern from previous executives we'd removed. Give them a day. Then the real reactions will begin. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, though I doubt they'll reach acceptance anytime soon. I leaned back in my chair, finally allowing myself to feel the weight of the day. In less than 12 hours, I'd shed a false identity, ended a marriage, fired 5 executives, and stepped into the public eye as CEO. The mask I'd worn for 8 years had been discarded, revealing the powerful woman underneath. Was it worth it? Sarah asked quietly, breaking protocol for a moment of honest curiosity. I thought about years of subtle humiliation, of watching James and his friends crush other people's dreams for sport, of witnessing their casual cruelty to everyone they deemed beneath them. I thought about the women who'd left the company rather than endure another day of their toxic leadership, the innovative ideas dismissed because they came from the wrong people, the culture of fear they'd created. Ask me again in a week, I replied, turning back to my monitors. There was still work to be done, a company to run, a culture to rebuild, and a reputation to restore. After all, revenge wasn't just about one dramatic moment. It was about ensuring they never recovered enough to hurt anyone else again. The next morning arrived with a flurry of activity. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., but I arrived at the office at dawn. There was strategic maneuvering to be done before addressing the troops, who would undoubtedly have questions about the sudden changes. We've got movement, as Sarah reported, striding into my office with her ever-present tablet. James tried to contact the Thompson account at 3 a.m. from his personal email, probably hoping to poach our biggest client. Fortunately, we had already locked down all client communications, I noted, pulling up the monitoring dashboard on my screen. In the 12 hours since their termination, each of the fired executives had made predictable moves. Michael had tried to download client lists before his access was revoked. Peterson had documented every attempt, building our case even stronger. Their severance packages? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Voided due to documented misconduct. Legal has compiled a thorough brief outlining exactly why they receive nothing. Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet, bringing up financial reports. James tried to access his investment accounts at midnight. He seemed surprised to learn that his stock options were worthless under the misconduct clause. I smiled, remembering all the times he'd bragged about his company shares at dinner parties, acting as if he'd earned them through brilliant strategy rather than marriage to the founder. He'd never bothered to read the fine print about misconduct clauses or the fact that those options were designed to vest only under specific conditions he'd now violated. What about the others? 2 have already reached out to competitors. We've documented the attempts, clear violations of their non-compete agreements. Sarah paused, a hint of amusement in her voice. And James's mother has been quite vocal on social media about her daughter-in-law's betrayal, though she's carefully avoiding any mention of why he was fired. I pulled up the social media monitoring feed. The story was spreading, but not in the way James had probably hoped. Former employees were coming forward with their own stories of harassment and discrimination, each post reinforcing our narrative of necessary corporate house cleaning. Time for the next move, I announced, pulling up a carefully prepared email. With one click, I sent invitations to one-on-one meetings with every employee who had reported to James and his inner circle, meetings that would assess their capabilities, determine who had been promoted based on merit versus loyalty, and identify talented people who had been held back. That's going to cause some anxiety, as Sarah observed, watching the email blast go out. Good. I want them off balance. The best way to identify who was part of the problem versus who was just following orders is to see how they react under pressure. The morning unfolded like a well-played chess game. While James and his friends were presumably nursing their wounds and plotting revenge from their respective homes, we were systematically dismantling their corporate legacy, reassigning projects, reviewing decisions, and correcting the course they'd set. At 9:45 a.m., I stood before the mirror in my private bathroom, making final adjustments to my appearance. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the meek wife James had mocked for years. Today's armor was a steel grey Omarni suit accessorized with quiet but unmistakable power, the kind of outfit that announced authority without having to say a word. The auditorium is full, as Sarah reported, appearing in the doorway. Everyone's waiting. The live stream is set up for our international offices. I nodded, gathering my thoughts one last time. Start the recording. The all-hands meeting would be documented for legal purposes and to ensure our message reached every employee across all time zones. As I walked onto the stage, the hushed whispers died immediately, replaced by a silence heavy with anticipation. Good morning, I began, my voice carrying easily through the state-of-the-art sound system. I'm Alexandra Chin, founder and CEO of Reynolds Technologies. Some of you knew me as James Morrison's wife. Today, you'll know me as your leader. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. In the front row, I could see the HR team squirming, probably remembering yesterday's sham interview and realizing the legal exposure their biased practices had created. Yesterday, we terminated 5 executives for cause. You've all heard the rumors. Yes. One was my husband. Yes, it was because of documented misconduct, harassment, and abuse of power. I paused, letting that sink in. But today isn't about them. It's about us, about the company we're going to be moving forward. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for Reynolds Technologies, a vision I'd held since founding the company but had been forced to implement through proxies and intermediaries. With each point, I systematically dismantled the toxic culture James and his friends had fostered, introducing new reporting structures, enhanced HR protocols, anonymous feedback channels, and promotion criteria based on measurable results rather than executive favor. My door is open, I concluded, looking directly into the cameras that were streaming my words to offices around the world. Not metaphorically. Literally. Starting today, any employee can schedule time with me directly. No gatekeepers, no filters, no fear of reprisal for speaking truth to power. The applause that followed was tentative at first, then growing stronger as the reality sank in. As I left the stage, Sarah showed me her tablet. The company's internal messaging system was exploding with positive responses, with employees sharing their own experiences under the previous regime and expressing cautious optimism about the future. Back in my office, the next phase began. One by one, I met with James's former direct reports, each conversation a delicate balance of reassurance and assessment, identifying potential allies and threats, separating the competent from the complicit. James called again. Sarah reported between meetings, checking her secure phone. This time from a burner phone. He's demanding a private meeting to clear things up between us. Document it with legal, I replied, reviewing the notes from my last meeting with a promising manager who'd been repeatedly passed over despite excellent performance reviews. And check his mother's social media. She usually telegraphs his next move before he makes it. By late afternoon, the corporate chessboard had shifted dramatically. 3 of James's most loyal managers had resigned rather than adapt to the new regime. 2 others had provided valuable information about past misconduct in exchange for amnesty. The office felt different, lighter somehow, as if a heavy cloud had lifted, allowing sunlight to stream through the windows. The Thompson account called, Sarah announced, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes betraying her satisfaction. They want to meet the real CEO as soon as possible. I smiled, remembering James's mockery of my suggestions about their account. Schedule it for tomorrow, and send them the presentation I've been working on, the one James rejected last month for being too aggressive. A notification popped up on my screen. James had been spotted at a bar with Michael and 2 other former executives. Our surveillance team was monitoring their conversation, capturing every word for potential legal action. They're plotting something, as Sarah observed, looking over my shoulder at the live feed. Of course they are, I replied, pulling up contingency plans we prepared months ago for exactly this scenario. Let them plot. Every move they make just gives us more ammunition. I turned to the window, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere out there, 5 angry men were discovering just how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered, how completely their actions had led to their own downfall. Tomorrow, I told Sarah, we start phase 2 of our plan. Let's see how they handle being the ones looking for jobs. After all, in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. And I had been playing this game long before they even knew they were pieces. Dawn found me reviewing surveillance footage from the bar where James and his cohorts had gathered the previous night. Their angry conversations, fueled by expensive scotch I was no longer paying for, had provided exactly the evidence we needed to strengthen our legal position against any potential lawsuits. They're planning to sue, as Sarah announced, entering my office with 2 steaming coffee cups, both black, no sugar, the way I preferred but had never told James. James contacted 3 law firms this morning. I accepted the coffee, hiding my smile behind the rim of the cup. Show me. She pulled up the morning surveillance report on her tablet. James had indeed been busy, making calls from the moment offices opened, but each firm he'd contacted was already subtly connected to Reynolds Technologies through various shell companies and legal entanglements. Any attempts to retain them would hit an immediate conflict of interest wall, sending him back to square one. He's also been reaching out to our major clients, as Sarah continued, scrolling through intercepted emails and call logs. Particularly the Thompson account. Forward me the recordings. The audio files played through my private speaker system. James's voice still carried that entitled confidence as he tried to convince our clients that he'd been wrongfully terminated, that his wife had manipulated her way into power, that the company was in danger under my leadership. Mr. Thompson's response? I asked, though I could guess based on our long relationship with the client. Sarah played the next clip. Thompson's voice was cold, professional, but with an undercurrent of disgust. James, your wife's proposal last week was brilliant. The one you dismissed as too aggressive, yes? We found out about that. Don't contact us again. I pulled up our evidence database on my secure terminal. For over a year, we'd been building an airtight case against James and his inner circle, every harassment incident, every discriminatory comment, every abuse of power, all meticulously documented with timestamps, witnesses, and supporting evidence. The board wants an update, as Sarah noted, checking her calendar. They're concerned about potential blowback from the terminations. Schedule a meeting for this afternoon, and bring me everything from the last 3 years, emails, meeting recordings, expense reports, performance reviews they altered. It's time to show them exactly why this house cleaning was necessary and long overdue. The morning unfolded in a series of strategic moves. While James and his friends were burning through their savings on legal consultations with increasingly desperate attempts to find representation, we were systematically fortifying our position against any potential attack. HR provided a thick file of complaints that had been buried under the previous management. IT extracted emails that had been accidentally deleted from the system but preserved in our secure backups. Former employees began reaching out, offering testimonies about the toxic culture they'd fled rather than endure. James's mother is escalating her social media campaign, as Sarah reported, checking her monitoring feeds. She's claiming you seduced him as part of a long-term corporate takeover plan, calling you a gold digger who tricked her son. I laughed, pulling up the prenuptial agreement James had insisted upon, claiming he needed to protect his assets from me. Send her lawyers a copy of this, the one her son demanded to protect his assets from his apparently gold-digging wife. Let's see how she spins that. By midday, Our legal team had compiled a devastating brief. Every instance of James bragging about manipulating stock options, every recorded conversation about sidelining qualified female candidates, every documented abuse of company resources, all presented in damning detail with irrefutable evidence. The surveillance team picked up something interesting, as Sarah said, rushing into my office after lunch, her composure briefly cracked with genuine excitement. They met with someone from our competitor, Atlas Tech, last night. I pulled up the footage. Through the high-end microphones we planted, James could be heard offering to reveal company secrets in exchange for executive positions for himself and his friends, a clear violation of his non-compete agreement and potentially industrial espionage. Send copies to their lawyers, EI instructed, watching the men dig their graves even deeper. And to Atlas Tech's board. Let's see how quickly they distance themselves from toxic assets. The afternoon board meeting was a masterclass in corporate strategy. One by one, I presented evidence of why each terminated executive had to go, building a case so strong that the board's concerns melted away as they realized the extent of the corruption we'd excised. There's more, EI announced, pulling up financial records we'd been quietly reviewing for months. We've traced irregular payments through their expense accounts. The SEC would be very interested in some of these transactions. James is on his way up, as Sarah interrupted, checking her tablet with raised eyebrows. He's somehow convinced the lobby security to let him in. I smiled, pulling up the lobby camera feed. No, I convinced security to let him in. Watch. On the screen, James stormed through the lobby, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face flushed with anger and the effects of last night's drinking. He was clutching a folder that undoubtedly contained what he thought was damaging information. Perhaps emails I'd sent as the Phantom CEO, maybe financial records he'd misinterpreted. Should I have security stop him? Sarah asked, already reaching for her phone. Not yet. Let's see what he thinks he has. Sometimes the most devastating blow is letting your opponent deliver their best shot and watching it fail. Minutes later, James burst into the boardroom, the doors banging against the walls as he made his dramatic entrance. His triumphant expression faltered as he saw me calmly seated at the head of the table, surrounded by board members whose faces showed nothing but cool assessment of the interruption. I have proof, he announced, waving his folder like a weapon. Proof that she orchestrated this whole thing. You mean proof that I founded this company, built it from nothing, ran it successfully while you took credit for my strategies? I stood slowly, power in every movement. Or proof that I documented your misconduct for years while you mocked my supposed unemployment? The board members watched silently as James's confidence crumbled before their eyes, the folder in his hands suddenly seeming inadequate against the mountain of evidence surrounding us. You trapped me, he stammered, his voice breaking on the last word. No, James, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. You trapped yourself. Every time you belittled a candidate, every time you pushed aside a qualified woman, every time you laughed about your unemployable wife, you built this case against yourself, brick by brick, day by day, year after year. I nodded to Sarah, who pulled up our complete evidence file on the room screens. James watched in horror as years of his misconduct played out in high definition before the board and legal team. Your choices, I continued calmly, are simple. Leave now, respect the non-compete agreement, and keep whatever dignity you have left. Or fight, and watch as every detail of your behavior becomes public record in a lawsuit you cannot win. You can't, he began, desperation edging into his voice. Security, I interrupted, pressing a button on my desk. Please escort Mr. Morrison out. And this time, revoke his lobby access. Permanently. As security led him away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, I turned back to the board, my expression all business. Now, about those irregular financial transactions I mentioned earlier. The rest of the afternoon was spent strengthening our legal position against any potential backlash. Every piece of evidence was catalogued, every testimony recorded, every document notarized by independent third parties. By evening, we had built a case so solid that no reputable law firm would touch James's claims with a 10-foot pole. They're meeting again tonight, as Sarah reported as darkness fell outside my office windows. Same bar as yesterday. Good, EI replied, reviewing the latest surveillance request from our legal team. Let's hear what other evidence they're willing to give us. After all, the best case is built by letting your opponents think they're winning, right until the moment they lose everything. The bar surveillance proved more valuable than we could have hoped. Drunk on expensive whiskey and wounded pride, James and his friends spent hours inadvertently confessing to years of corporate malfeasance, from manipulating performance reviews to drive out employees they didn't like, to insider trading schemes that had enriched their personal portfolios at the company's expense. Play that section again, I instructed Sarah the next morning, leaning forward in my chair to catch every damning word. Through our high-quality surveillance feed, James's slurred voice filled my office. I remember that merger last year? The one that made us look like geniuses? Well, let me tell you how we really pulled that off. What followed was a detailed confession of insider trading, complete with names, dates, and dollar amounts that our legal team had suspected but never been able to prove until now. Send this to legal, I ordered, the pieces of my final strategy falling into place. And notify the SEC anonymously. It's time to create our perfect storm. Perfect Storm was the culmination of months of planning, a carefully orchestrated series of events designed to trap James and his cohorts in their own web of deceit, ensuring they would never work in our industry again. The first phase began immediately. Leak the merger investigation to the financial press, I instructed, watching Sarah set the wheels in motion. But make it seem like it came from a concerned former employee, not the company. Within hours, the story hit the business news networks. Reynolds' technology stock took a small hit, exactly as planned. James and his friends, already paranoid and watching their investments, would see it as an opportunity to save themselves from further losses. They're panicking, as Sarah reported, monitoring their phone calls through legal channels. All 5 of them are calling their brokers simultaneously. I watched the trading monitors as they frantically sold their shares, trying to get ahead of what they thought was coming, unaware they were walking into a trap years in the making. With each sale, they dug themselves deeper into legal jeopardy, creating a clear case of attempted market manipulation based on insider knowledge. Now, I said, nodding to Sarah. Release Phase 2. The press release went out company-wide and to all major news outlets simultaneously. Reynolds Technologies was announcing a major restructuring and expansion, including new government contracts and technological breakthroughs we'd kept under wraps for months. Our stock price shot up within minutes, but James and his friends had already sold at a loss, a clear case of insider trading that would attract immediate regulatory attention. Mr. Thompson from the SEC is on line 1, as Sarah announced, barely containing her satisfaction. I took the call on speaker. Alexandra Chin speaking. Ms. Chin, we've received some very interesting information about last year's merger and some unusual trading activity from your former executives. Yes, we've been conducting an internal investigation, I replied smoothly, years of practice making the lie sound like simple truth. I'd be happy to share our findings, including some rather illuminating surveillance footage from a bar last night. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. By midday, the SEC had opened a formal investigation into James and his friends' trading activities. The Antitrust Commission was reviewing the merger based on our anonymous tip, and our stock price was soaring as the market responded to our expansion announcement. James is trying to leave the country, as Sarah reported, checking her surveillance feeds with raised eyebrows. His passport was mysteriously flagged at the airport's security checkpoint. I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. How unfortunate for him. And the others? Michael is having a breakdown in his broker's office. 2 more are meeting with criminal defense lawyers. The last one is attempting to delete his email history, not realizing we already have everything backed up and time-stamped. The afternoon brought more developments, each more devastating than the last. Our anonymous tips had sparked investigations at 3 other companies where James and his friends had previously worked. Former colleagues, sensing blood in the water, began coming forward with their own stories of misconduct and ethical breaches. Their lawyers are requesting a meeting, as Sarah announced, checking her secure phone. They are offering to settle all claims. Decline, EI replied, watching the latest news coverage of the developing scandal at Reynolds Technologies. Let them sweat a little longer. By tomorrow, their negotiating position will be even weaker. By evening, the perfect storm was in full swing. The SEC investigation had expanded to include their personal trading accounts. The Antitrust Commission had frozen their assets pending review. 3 separate class action lawsuits had been filed by former employees alleging systematic discrimination under their leadership. James's mother has gone quiet on social media, as Sarah noted with satisfaction, checking her monitoring feeds one last time before leaving for the day. She probably saw the insider trading allegations. Even she can't spin that positively, EI replied, thinking of the woman who had once boasted about her successful son at charity events, making sure everyone knew he was her big-shot executive while his wife couldn't even find entry-level work. A notification popped up on my screen. James was attempting to access his frozen accounts, growing increasingly desperate as each transaction was declined by banks now wary of regulatory scrutiny. Should we release the bar footage to the media? Sarah asked, pausing at my office door. Not yet, EI stood, walking to the window to watch the city lights come on as darkness fell. Let's see how they handle tomorrow first. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of perfect storm. While James and his friends were distracted by investigations and frozen assets, we had been quietly buying up their dumped shares through shell companies. When the market opened, Reynolds Technologies would announce a major government contract, one we'd been secretly negotiating for months but had kept under wraps until the perfect moment. Their wives are calling divorce lawyers, as Sarah reported, checking her tablet one last time for the day. Apparently they're not happy about potentially losing everything due to their husband's fraud. I thought about the prenup James had insisted upon, thinking he was protecting himself from a gold-digging wife. How ironic that it would now protect my assets from his legal troubles while his wife left him penniless. Send them all meeting invitations for tomorrow morning, EI instructed, my voice steady despite the satisfaction coursing through me. 9 a.m. sharp. They won't come, Sarah predicted, shaking her head at the audacity of the request. Oh, they will, EI turned from the window, my reflection hard and clear in the darkening glass. Because right now, I'm their only hope of survival. As night fell over the city, I reviewed tomorrow's script one final time. In less than 12 hours, James and his friends would sit in my office, broken and desperate, as I presented them with their options, the choice between total destruction and merely complete humiliation. Their security badges are ready, as Sarah said, placing 5 visitor passes on my desk before leaving for the night. I picked one up, running my thumb over James's photo, the same photo from the company ID he'd flashed so proudly at restaurants to get better tables, at clubs to get special treatment. Tomorrow, then, EI whispered to the empty office. After all, the perfect storm wasn't just about destruction. It was about forcing your enemies to acknowledge the lightning before the thunder struck, to recognize not just their defeat, but the architect of their downfall. And as I gathered my things to leave for the night, I allowed myself one small, private smile. 8 years of playing the supportive, unsuccessful wife had taught me patience. But tomorrow would teach James and his friends something far more valuable. The most dangerous person in any room is the one you've convinced yourself to underestimate. Have you ever been underestimated? What would you have done in my place? Would you have had the strength to wait 8 years for the perfect moment of revenge, or would you have shown your hand too soon? Because sometimes the most devastating power isn't in what you do, it's in what you wait to do until exactly the right moment. Cars, their drivers, my employees, discreetly documenting their intoxicated state with dashboard cameras. More evidence for their ever-growing files. I changed into my night clothes, the same modest pajamas I'd worn for years as part of my facade, though I preferred silk when alone. One last night of pretense. Tomorrow I would wake up as James's underestimated wife. But by sunset, I would be revealed as Alexandra Chin, CEO of Reynolds Technologies, and the architect of their downfall. Through the bedroom window, I watched their cars disappear into the night, weaving slightly on the private drive. In 12 hours, they would arrive at their offices, nursing hangovers, completely unaware that their world was about to implode with the force of a supernova. The thought brought a small smile to my face as I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of tomorrow's sweet revelation. Was it wrong to feel such anticipation for their downfall? Perhaps. But after years of degradation and dismissal, I allowed myself this one night of vindictive pleasure. Wouldn't you, in my position? Morning arrived with the precision of a well-orchestrated plan, the sun breaking through the clouds as if even nature approved of what was to come. I woke before James, watching from the bathroom doorway as he struggled with his hangover, popping painkillers and cursing under his breath as he rushed to prepare for what he thought would be a normal day at the office. Little did he know, I had already been awake for hours, preparing for the performance of a lifetime. Another interview today, he asked with that patronizing smile as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, a tie I'd bought him for our anniversary. Maybe this one will pan out, honey. Law of averages and all that. Maybe, I replied softly, handing him his briefcase, the one with the monogram he'd insisted on, paid for with my money. Have a good day at work. His kiss on my cheek felt like an insult, his cologne too strong, his confidence unearned. I watched him leave, counting the minutes until I could set my own plan in motion. As soon as his car disappeared down the driveway, I moved with practiced efficiency. While James was still on his commute, I had already arrived at Reynolds Technologies. At 6:30 a.m., I entered through the service entrance, dressed in an intentionally unremarkable navy suit from a department store, a far cry from the designer clothes hanging in my closet. Sarah, dressed in her usual impeccable executive attire, met me in the basement security office, away from prying eyes and security cameras. Everything's in place, as she murmured, handing me a visitor's badge with the name we'd chosen weeks ago. The interview is scheduled for 9 a.m. with HR. James's team has their regular morning meeting at the same time. Peterson will keep them occupied and recording. The visitor's badge felt strange against my blazer. Angela Martinez, interview candidate. For years, I'd observed my company through cameras and reports, making decisions that affected thousands of employees, but today's performance needed a personal touch, a chance to witness firsthand how deep the rot had spread throughout my organization. How are you feeling? Sarah asked, her usual professional demeanor softening for a moment. Like I've been preparing for this day for 8 years, I replied, straightening my intentionally cheap blazer. Let's make it count. I sat in the lobby, purposefully arriving an hour early, the eager candidate, desperate to impress. I'd studied the body language of nervous applicants, the way they fidgeted with their folders, checked their watches, rehearsed answers under their breath. Now I mimicked those behaviors flawlessly, just another hopeful in a sea of daily candidates. The security guard barely glanced at me, too busy greeting the stream of executives arriving for their day of reckoning. I watched them pass, men and women who worked for me but had never seen my face, who made decisions based on my vision but thought I was just an abstract entity somewhere far removed from their daily operations. I watched James stride through the lobby at 8:45, his confident gait betraying no indication of his hangover thanks to the painkillers. He didn't even notice me sitting there, hidden behind my prop reading material. Ironically, the company's own annual report, my report, detailing the successes I'd engineered. Miss Martinez? The HR representative, Thomas, appeared right on schedule. I recognized him from his hiring file, competent, but too eager to please the executive team at the expense of qualified candidates. Please follow me to the interview suite. The elevator ride to the HR floor was filled with the kind of small talk I'd engineered through our corporate culture initiatives, meaningless pleasantries that masked the cutthroat environment James and his team had created. Great weather we're having today, and the traffic wasn't too bad this morning, all while employees nodded politely at the woman they assumed was just another hopeful candidate, perhaps already pitying my inevitable rejection. We'll start with a brief skills assessment, Thomas explained as he led me to a small testing room with outdated computers, a stark contrast to the executive floors with their state-of-the-art technology. This will be followed by a panel interview with some of our team leaders if your assessment meets our requirements. His tone carried that subtle condescension reserved for candidates they'd already decided not to hire, regardless of qualifications. The skills assessment was almost insulting in its simplicity. Basic coding problems and business scenarios I could have solved in my sleep, problems I had likely created myself years ago. I deliberately made small mistakes, playing the role of the nervous applicant struggling under pressure. Through the glass walls of the testing room, I could see James and his cohorts in their morning meeting, laughing about something, probably another candidate they decided to toy with, another career they'd casually destroy over coffee and pastries. Well, Thomas said, reviewing my intentionally flawed work with barely concealed dismissal, this is interesting. Your approach to the market segmentation problem is unconventional. Let's move on to the panel interview, shall we? The conference room he led me to overlooked the city, a view I usually enjoyed from my private office 24 floors above, where I could see not just the city but the future I was building. 3 middle managers waited inside, all wearing the same expression of bored superiority that came from having too much power over other people's dreams. I recognized each face from their personnel files, knew their salaries, their performances, their secret office relationships, their weaknesses. So, Miss Martinez, began the first interviewer, a man named Richard who had been passed over for promotion twice due to customer complaints about his attitude, complaints I'd personally reviewed. He didn't even bother to introduce himself, assuming his position gave him automatic importance. I see you've been between positions for some time. Yes, I replied softly, adding a slight tremor to my voice that I'd practiced in the mirror. It's been challenging in this market, especially for women over 35 in tech. The subtle age discrimination reference flew over their heads, but would play beautifully in the recordings our legal team was gathering. And what makes you think you're qualified for a position at Reynolds Technologies? The second interviewer, a woman named Janet who had risen through the ranks by adopting the worst traits of the men around her, barely looked up from her phone as she asked the question. I launched into the carefully crafted story we'd prepared, a mix of genuine qualifications masked by apparent desperation, a narrative designed to trigger every bias they harbored. With each response, I watched them grow more dismissive, exchanging glances that spoke volumes about the toxic culture they'd embraced. They'd already decided my fate in the first 30 seconds, just as they'd done to countless other qualified candidates who didn't fit their narrow preconceptions of what success looked like. Through the glass walls, I could see James passing by on his way to another meeting. He did a double take when he spotted me, then smirked, pulling out his phone. Moments later, the interviewer's phones buzzed simultaneously. I didn't need to see their screens to know he was messaging them about his wife's latest embarrassing attempt at employment, adding another layer of bias to an already tainted process. The rest of the interview was a masterclass in corporate cruelty, subtle jabs about minor employment gaps, exchanged glances when I mentioned my ideas for improving company culture, barely concealed yawns when I discussed my qualifications. I documented every microaggression, every breach of our HR policies, while maintaining my facade of nervous optimism. Their mysterious CEO was James's supposedly unemployable wife. The story would be racing through every department, growing more dramatic with each retelling, becoming corporate legend in real time. Schedule an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning, I decided after a moment's reflection. It's time they met their real CEO, not the caricature James created, but the woman who's been guiding this company all along. They deserve to hear the truth from me directly. A subtle alert flashed on my screen. James had arrived at his mother's house, driven there by security since his company car had already been reclaimed. The security feed showed him standing among boxes of his belongings hastily packed by the household staff, his mother's expression moving from confusion to horror as he explained the morning's events. His company car GPS shows it's still in our parking lot. Security is waiting.